Hello friends, welcome to the M.A.R.E podcast. Before we get started, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Don't forget that you can find more about the M.A.R.E project at www.marehamburg.com, and you can support the project and this podcast through Patreon. All the links are in the description. Enjoy!
Dear friends, welcome to another episode of the M.A.R.E podcast. I hope everyone is enjoying their summer, either you're on fieldwork, writing that chapter, just enjoying your summer break, as maybe we all should. Thank you for tuning in once more, and today's a very special day because the last remaining member of the M.A.R.E committee has given in to peer pressure and makes his appearance on this podcast. Today I'm joined by Juan, a very dear friend of mine and the second amphora specialist we have on this podcast. Shout out to Olga from episode 4. Juan is originally from Spain, and even though it sounds paradoxical, his more maybe traditional approach to material evidence, it's sometimes a breath of fresh air in this post-processual world we live in. But I'll let him tell us all about it. Juan, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure being here with you again after sharing our time during the field work some months ago. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Absolutely. It's great to see you. So Juan, let's start by maybe you introducing yourself and telling us a bit about you and where you studied and what you're doing right now and about your life in general.
Okay, so I'm from Spain and I did my bachelor's at the University of Sevilla in the south of Spain. And there I studied archaeology. During that time, I was already interested on long distance trades mainly, and also in the Near East, archaeology of the Near East. Sadly, in Spain, it is very hard to work on the archaeology of the Near East, at least if you want to work on the Iron Age or the Bronze Age. There are not that many teams that work on that, and most of the teams that do work, they work from a philological point of view. So if you want to be an Egyptologist, you can do it. As a geologist, you can also do it. But if you want to be an archaeologist, working with the material evidence, then it's not so easy. So for that reason, there wasn't anyone at my department that could help me do research on the Eastern Mediterranean or the Near East. So for that reason, my bachelor thesis, which has nothing to do with what I'm working now on, I compared the decoration of the pottery of the Middle Neolithic in Spain, in a cave from Spain, called Cueva de la Dehesilla, with the decoration of the ostrich eggs that were decorated during the Paleolithic in North Africa, using ecological means. So it was a very interesting research that in a way was also talking about mobility of people, long distance mobility of people. But really, it was not what I wanted to continue my research on. It was very interesting, but still not my topic, I thought. So for that reason, I decided to go to the Eastern Mediterranean Basin. In other countries, it's not so easy. There are not that many English taught programs. In Cyprus, I knew there was one English taught program, and I didn't want to work on other universities, let's say in the UK, Germany, France, etc., and go to Cyprus for 1 month a year. I wanted to be there and to be involved with archaeology myself, with the Department of Antiquities, with the museums. So I decided to go to Cyprus. I had also some experience with Phoenician archaeology in Spain. So I said, okay, Iron Age, Eastern Mediterranean, Near Eastern archaeology, and the connection between the Eastern Mediterranean and the Western Mediterranean. Okay, so I went to Cyprus and I started my research there, which for my master's thesis was studying the Phoenician amphora. Technically, we call them now maritime transport containers, but amphora is a very well-known term, so it's the one that I will use now for this podcast. And I specifically studied the classical period amphora from the necropolis of Kition. Kition is the main site of Cyprus, which has connection with the Levant. Of course, not the only one, but the main site. And also, its expansion during the classical period is huge and really important with the influence of the Persian power. So there are hundreds and hundreds of Phoenician amphora in the necropolis. And the Phoenician amphora, which has not been so well studied as the Greek amphora, are not well known at all in the classical period. So I said, okay, this is going to be perfect. This is a specific topic in which I can understand the Eastern Mediterranean trade, long-distance trade, wine trade mainly, with some experience I had already with the Phoenicians, and about types that are not well studied. Also, here at Cyprus, which right now I'm in Cyprus, I also got introduced into maritime archaeology in my master's. So amphora it's not only a matter of trade, it's also a really important matter, an item that was transported by ships. They were designed, maritime transport containers, to be transported by ships. So adding this view, which is not so common in the let's say archaeology, to see the amphora not only as items but also as a maritime transport containers, it really helped. And I think it gave a point of view that is not so common, even more for Phoenician amphora. And that's what I did for my master's. Now, currently, in 2 months, I'll start my PhD here at the University of Cyprus. And the idea is to expand both chronologically and typologically and geographically as well, to study all the Phoenician amphora of the island, to try to understand the different trade patterns in the island with the Levant, if the different influences from the Eastern Mediterranean empires had, which kind of influence it had in the trade between the different city kingdoms and the Levant, or not. And right now I'm starting with Kition again, but looking at the archaic material as well, not only classical, but also archaic.
Very nice. Wonderful. So I actually, we were talking about it before, but I had no idea what you did for your bachelor's thesis. And now I'm surprised, impressed. That's so interesting. The pottery decoration and ostrich eggs from wow. That's it. But anyway, we're not going to talk about this right now because obviously this is not your focus of your life. So let's move to the maritime transport containers, as you said. So can you give us a bit of a, if someone like me or someone else doesn't know what a Phoenician amphora is, can you give us kind of an introduction? What is a Phoenician amphora? Why do we call them Phoenicians? What do they look like? Do they only carry wine? Do they carry everything? Give us a short introduction to it.
So Phoenician is a term that is referred to geographically the Levant, the central Levant, let's say, so what is now mainly Lebanon, but also the north of Israel and the south of Syria. So from ancient Arvad to south of Akko, it depends also on the specific chronology. It moves a bit the frontier, let's say, border. But in general, it's just to refer to a group of people that were living in the Levant during the Iron Age. The difference between Canaanite as a term and Phoenician is mainly chronological. As archaeologists, we have decided to use Canaanite for the Late Bronze Age and Phoenician for the Iron Age. But it's a group of people that didn't change that much since the Late Bronze Age and the Iron Age, even with the sea peoples that we all know about. So it's just really an archaeological term, also referred to geographically, a part of the Levant, let's say. And about amphoras maritime transport containers, from the Bronze Age, they are registered to producing some items to be transported in ships, and so that's why we say maritime transport containers. But amphora is the Greek term. Usually in the Levant, they are called storage jars, and amphora in the Greek word. To differentiate between them, also because last decades, some decades ago, they were not that sure that the Phoenician amphora were used also to be transported. But because of its wide distribution all around the Mediterranean, now we have found it's a better term to call them maritime transport containers, as most of them were produced mainly to be transported by sea. And I think you asked me as well about how do they look. So the most famous types are the types that they are famously called torpedo shaped. They look like a torpedo, exactly. Mm-hmm. Completely cylindrical body with a round shoulder, straight rim, relatively big, around 80 centimeters high. And those are the most famous Phoenician amphora because they were transported all around the Mediterranean through the colonization. So they are mainly dated to the 8th century, and you can find them from Spain to the Levant, all the Levant, Egypt, Cyprus. They are not so common in Greece. There are some, not so common. And it's one of the main items that have been studied about Phoenicians. Mainly this type, the torpedo, because it's the one related to the colonization. So it's easy to recognize as well and to try to understand. But it has not been that long since we know properly their chronology, distribution in the Eastern Mediterranean. They are not so well studied as other types. And even now that we have studied them, mainly in Israel, a big team have studied them, we still don't know the differences between the productions of different, let's say, half a century, decades, as we can do with some Greek amphora, like the Chios amphora. We know literally by decades the evolution of their shapes, and we don't know that about the Phoenician amphora at all.
Wow, super interesting. So how do we know? How did we start naming those amphoras, those transport containers, as Phoenicians? Was it the clay, the fabric, or did we find like a production center?
It's mainly related to the place in which more of them has been found, in which context have them been found. So in Phoenician sites, they are very widely distributed, so we know that it's a production from Phoenicia. Also, a really big kiln site, production center site, was found at Sarepta, which I can tell you that is also the most common fabric that I can see at Cyprus, in Kition at least. And so, yeah, those are very easy to recognize and well known.
Okay, yeah, excellent. So, right, so how many, in approximation, how big is the Phoenician amphora sample in Cyprus? Are we talking about hundreds of amphoras, or are we talking about 50 amphoras, or like thousands of amphoras? What's the image you see?
So one thing you have to take in mind about amphora is that they are courseware, and people don't really study them unless they are complete. For people that are not working with them directly. Mm-hmm. So if you're excavating a site and you find 3-4 courseware sherds, you don't even publish them. So as to how many of them there are in the island, probably a lot of them. What I can tell you is that they have been found in most of the big city kingdoms, if not all, mainly in the coastal sites of Cyprus. So in Salamis, Kition, Kurion, Amathus, Palepaphos, even in the north, Ebuni, they are Marion, they are common, they're all around them, but the most of them has been published only when they are found in tombs, so complete vessels. Of course, it's way easier and way more interesting for people that were doing archaeology 80 years ago. For example, most of the amphoras have been published by the Swedish, and they came to Cyprus in the 30s, and they excavated a lot of the Iron Age sites, and they have published a lot of them. But by shares, there are not so many of them published. There is around 80 or even more related to the sanctuary of Amathus, in archaic levels. There are a lot of them in Kition. Now I'm working with the Kition material, and there are hundreds and hundreds. It's every tray I see has some kind of Phoenician amphora. Sometimes it's a shoulder, sometimes it's a rim, sometimes a handle. They're all around Kition, and I don't know exactly in which quantity they were distributed in other sites, but I can tell you that probably they were in all sites.
Very interesting. Yeah. So how do you approach this? Because you, knowing from the struggles you're going through to study them, and you sound surprised to say there's so many in Kition. Every trade I pick up, there's some part of an amphora in it. So how do you, since, as you say, there must be many of them, not everything is published because they like to publish complete vessels and not courseware. How do you, methodologically, how do you approach this research to make sure that you're covering as much as possible? Do you just like go all out in storage rooms and say, whatever I find, I find?
So it's still hard to say because I'm still thinking about it, because now working with the Kition material for some months, I've been seeing that there are way more amphora than I expected them to be. From the published material, I knew that there were a lot of them. But again, the published are only big material, let's say. They don't have to be completely complete, sorry to use the same word, but they have to be big. So at least half of the body. Only those were published. Some of them were inventoried, but not published. So they say something like, looks like the number 3000. And it could be the same, could have slight small differences or not. But those are the important, let's say, inventory material. But apart from that, they also have a lot of trays, thousands and thousands of trays of the Gideon Cathari excavations. There are really thousands of them. And there, what they did was write in one of the books which material was in each tray. So for, let's say, Temple 1, which is the main part of the site and also what I'm studying now, they said in tray 1 to 10, there are Phoenician amphora. There are, you don't know which number, not only Phoenician amphora, but Phoenician amphora. So now I'm trying to locate those trays and see how many, which types, which fabrics, etc. But what I'm finding is that those trays that were supposed to have amphora have them, of course, but also the trays that were supposed not to have Phoenician amphora have them. Sometimes it's just a shoulder. Sometimes it's a weird type of rim that maybe they didn't recognize because the typology were not published properly in the 80s. So I'm finding that in almost all trays, they have some kind of remain of Phoenician amphora, even if it was not the idea behind and when they publish them.
Yeah. So of course, now you mentioned something very important, which is storage in archaeology and how we choose to store and preserve the material after an excavation. Because as we always say, someone may come look for them in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And in your case, going to do a research and be like, should be done in 2 months. But then you realize there's triple and 4 times the amount of material you expected. It changes everything for your research and your planning ahead. And nowadays, when everything is like on a deadline with the funding and with like all the things that are going on, it makes everything harder and harder and harder. So I think there's a lot of things we can go into because, when you say there's so many amphoras, Phoenician amphoras in Gideon, then we can go into the conversation of, was Gideon a colony of the Phoenicians? Or was it like, did they just like the amphora so much? I don't know if you have an opinion on this. You don't need to have an opinion. I know it's a kind of a controversial kind of topic. And of course, you just started, so I don't expect you to have like a full view of everything.
There's another big problem with this idea, talking about the amphora, is that the material from Gideon, the pottery from Gideon, it's very hard to differentiate from the material of Tyre, in this case, Sarepta, which Tyre, Sidon, we are not sure exactly who was controlling Sarepta because it's really close to both of them. It's in the middle of both sides. And it's really hard to differentiate the pottery made in Gideon and the one made there. So we are not even sure if they were producing Phoenician amphora in Gideon. I have my suspicions, but still, a lot of research is needed. But it's really hard to say. And as you mentioned, it's a controversial topic that not even the most specialist people on it have a proper idea yet. So exactly. I don't know.
Yeah, of course. I don't expect anyone to like have an answer to that. But on the same kind of train of thought, you mentioned something very important that I think we've talked about in the past, and it's important maybe noting that down about Cypriot archaeology, that when you were at your bachelor's degree, you said, if I wanted to study Egypt, I could be an Egyptologist. That's fine. If I want to study Assyria, I could be an Assyriologist, and that's great. But I want to study Cyprus, and it's neither of the two, and there's no specialist. So I don't know if you have any views on the topic of, should Cyprus be part of another specialty, or should Cyprus be a specialty on its own? And can this be applied to every island?
I think Cyprus is one of the most interesting places to understand Iron Age in general. I mean, it happens not only in the Iron Age, really from the Epipaleolithic. You can see that there are influences coming from outside the island, from the Levant. And then Cyprus itself, it's also influencing, it's the first stop, let's say, from the Levant to the west. So it's a key place, a key island to understand the story of the Mediterranean. Because I believe that we have to study the Mediterranean as a whole. And not, because this happens a lot, even in conferences, that you see people working in the Mediterranean. So Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, Israel, Lebanon, okay, and people working on the Western Mediterranean. But when there are conferences on the Western Mediterranean, the people from the Eastern Mediterranean come, and likewise the other way. So I feel like right now we should aim to try to join in between these two parts. And I believe that Cypriot archaeology has to be valued by itself. I think it's unique and really important to understand not only Cyprus, but the whole Mediterranean.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's a very correct, in my opinion, way to see things. Of course, the Mediterranean is a big, big sea with a long, long history. So if you say I'm a Mediterranean archaeologist, that means everything and nothing at the same time. But I totally agree with what you say, needing to like understanding both sides, because it's one sea, and it's like sometimes maybe like some places might be isolated, but usually the connection is there, and it's everywhere. So now you are studying your PhD at the University of Cyprus. Are you doing it connected with the University of Seville, or are you doing only in Cyprus?
Yeah. The idea is still not something official, but the idea is to do a co-tutel in between Universidad de Sevilla and University of Cyprus.
Very nice. Okay, so in University of Sevilla, in which you did your bachelor's, and who's the specialist in Sevilla that works with Phoenician?
Antonio Saez Romero, he's a specialist on Punic amphora.
Punic.
So yeah, having this expertise on amphora in general and Phoenician Punic, again, now I'll make another introduction to another term. Punic is the term that we use to refer to the Phoenicians in the Western Mediterranean, but mainly when we talk about the 5th century onwards. So if we are talking about archaic period, let's say, we say Phoenician as well. Punic, we use Punic as a term after, let's say, Carthage had a lot of power and they distanced themselves a bit from the main sites of Tyre. So Antonio is an expert on Punic amphora, and having Stella, my supervisor, Stella Domestica here in Cyprus, as a specialist of amphoras, maritime transport containers, is going to help me to understand from both sides, let's say, the traditional typological understanding of the amphora from Spain, and then the maritime transport container way of thinking.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You'll be the link. So just quick question: Are there significant differences between 8th century Phoenician amphoras from Cyprus and 5th century Punic amphoras from Western Mediterranean? Like significantly different? Are they?
I mean, the main shapes and let's say the main characteristics, like the small circular handles at the shoulder, are the same. They don't look. I mean, if you know them, by seeing one handle, you can know if it's an Eastern Mediterranean or Western Mediterranean. But the technology and the idea is the same of a Phoenician amphora. But from very early in the colonization, you can already see differences in the types. And by the 5th century, they are completely different. One thing that I'm going to try to study at some point is if the evolution of shape in the amphoras can be linked to the identity of being Phoenician, because one of the types that I see in the classical period and also in the late archaic in the Eastern Mediterranean Phoenician amphora is that they have a biconical shape, which is not so common. And also most of the Punic amphora, most famous Punic amphora, also had a biconical shape in the classical period. So I'm thinking that maybe we could have a relationship in between the people buying the content of this amphora to have an idea of that they were produced by the same kind of people, let's say Phoenician Punic. Could be something else. It's still a very early idea, but it's a topic that I want to explore.
No, that's super interesting. So you talked about what they carried. So about the Phoenician amphoras of Cyprus, was it just wine? You mentioned wine, I think, before. Or was it everything?
It's mainly wine. What we know, still, you said Phoenician amphora from Cyprus. I'm studying the Phoenician amphora that are found in Cyprus. But we are not sure that they were made in Cyprus. Most probably they were made in the Levant, just to clarify. And most likely they were transporting wine. Of course, they could have been reused, and most likely, some of them were not filled with only wine. At some point, maybe oil, but we have some evidence from shipwrecks, and they have found tartaric acid, which is coming from grapes. Also, in the amphorae I studied at Kition, I saw myself that there is some pitch remains on the interior of some walls, which is linked with the transportation of wine, because you wouldn't need pitch to transport oil for the amphora. So most likely, and also we have evidence from text, and there is a lot of evidence. It's not only archaeometry, but also wine production centers like the ones at Tel Burak found with a lot of Phoenician amphora, this same of types, very close by the wine presses. There are many evidences that tell us that they were mostly carrying wine, but not only, and probably they were reused.
Okay, very interesting. So to go back to the sample, the material you're working with, you said for your, correct me if I'm wrong, but for your master's thesis, you worked with the material from the necropolis of Kition, correct?
Correct.
So were the amphoras given as to the dead as kind of like a funerary gift? So is there like a social aspect to the amphora other than just being a transport vessel?
Yes. In Kition, they are found always. They're super common in almost all Phoenician tombs. They are found there, but they are found in a package which has three items: the amphora as the main, let's say for me at least, item, then a deeper jaglet, which is a kind of a small jug used to be introduced in the amphora and retrieve the content, the wine in this case, and then a bowl in which most likely they were pouring this wine to then consume, make a libation. It's not super clear. But another interesting topic is that sometimes at the necropolis, and it's also elsewhere, it's not only something that has been found in Kition, the amphoras are found with the clay stopper, so closed. They were closed when they were deposited, which makes me think that they were not using the wine itself, but the idea of giving this wine probably for the person that was dead to have it in another world. So the full amphora full of wine, and also its stopper, which is very interesting because we also don't know really well how they were closed to be transported. So these clay stoppers is a really interesting and important topic.
Oh, wow. So it's like, but those amphoras, they were not manufactured as funerary goods. They were manufactured to be used to transport things, and they just happened to use them in their rituals. So clarify this. When they were given those amphoras, when they give those amphoras to the dead, and they had those stoppers, do you think they were full of wine and give it, or like empty to give like the illusion of I'm giving you something, but it's actually empty?
I mean, of course, there is no remains of wine in this amphora. It has been lost with the time. Also, most of the tombs were excavated in emergency excavation, so rescue excavation. So even if they were, we don't know now. They were published some years ago, but they were excavated mainly related to the need of housing for the refugees from the north. So they were excavated really fast, and we don't know much about the context of some of them. So,
that would have been really cool.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, I wanted to continue answering you, but I forgot
Oh my god! So sorry.
Thought I had.
I tend to do that. I tend to think about things and just throw them, and then the person was.
Can you repeat your question? You can edit it later.
My question was about if the amphora was full or like empty and given empty, or you want to go to the question before?
Yeah.
Which was like
no, this one.
Okay, that one.
So I was not able to see the stoppers myself because they were in the museum and they are very fragile, so I couldn't see them. But from the publications, the stoppers were completely a whole. So let's say a whole clay lamp with no holes.
Yeah.
So if the stopper was found on top of the amphora, as I think it was, and it didn't have any hole, and the amphora was complete, most likely I would say that it was probably full of wine when it was deposited.
No, okay.
I think, really, I have not researched really in depth about this, but most probably to take this wine for the disease. Take in mind that this wine is a wine in antiquity and mainly imported wine from very far. It's a luxury item, semi-luxury item. It's not something that you would, at least for Cypriots, for people living in Cyprus, wine coming from Phoenicia wouldn't be a local wine, cheap wine. It's really something expensive. And it's the same in Egypt, where many of them have been found. It's a luxury good. So it's important to take that in mind.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. I think you're writing something about it. That's right. You're preparing something for it that I think
yes,
maybe hopefully published in the future, so people will be able to see your thoughts on the social aspect of consuming wine. But yeah, either way, this has been a tremendous conversation. Always love having conversation with you, and I'm sure that the people listening, by contacting the M.A.R.E project through our email or social media, can get in touch with you if they want to talk about amphoras more, or they have questions, or they want to collaborate, hopefully.
So they can help me, of course. I'm always open.
I'm open for help, exactly. So, thank you so much for being here. Do you have any closing remarks?
No, just that I want to thank you for making this podcast itself, not only with me, but also in general. I believe that having this initiative on maritime archaeology, early career researchers, it's going to help a lot of people just to be involved really in maritime archaeology, which is not so easy as a early researcher. So yeah, thank you very much for having me here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Let's meet again in 2 weeks for the next episode of the M.A.R.E podcast. Thank you very much. Bye.